5 most common reasons why you may get your visa application rejected on the day of the interview. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. And these, trust me, these are mostly, 99% of the cases, this is the reason why the visas get rejected. Now, this is true for almost all kinds of interview. You don't have to think of it as just an F1 visa thing, but it can both non-immigrant, immigrant type visas, B1, B2, E1, E2, everything is covered in this video. So I'm gonna get into those 5 ways. Before we begin, I want to tell you, hey, look, if you know how the process works, you may know that the consulate officer that is going to be interviewing you on the day of your, visa interview has full power. He is someone who is given, and I don't really like this about the process, but he or she has 100% of the power to basically accept or reject your application for the visa. Okay, so it's basically you have to convince the officer that, hey, look, everything's all right, my documentation, my reasons, everything's okay. If you're applying for a non-immigrant visa, you have to prove it to him. If you're applying for an immigrant visa, again, certain conditions have to be met. So that one person becomes your window to get the visa and actually move to the US or even, visit the US. Now, that's really the part where this process comes in. I mean, given that one particular officer has all the power, he can also permanently reject you, that, hey, look, you cannot ever appear for the visa interview again, no matter who you go to. You cannot even go to some other consulate. So that's something that the officer has the power to do. So in this video, we're going to ensure that you do not fall into one of these traps. I know the process is not really as optimal as it should be, but we're going to deal with that in this video. So, top 5 reasons. I'm going to start with reason number 1, and that is incomplete application or supporting documentation. This is also called the 221B slip. Incomplete application or supporting documentation. This is also called as the 221G rejection. Most cases you will get a 221G slip if you get a rejection because of this. Now, this is not a major issue. This comes up in a lot of cases where, of course, you cannot have no passport. If you don't have a passport, then you may not be able to even attend the interview, right? Because even before you attend the interview, they check all of these things. But some things your visa officer will check. Basically, the person who will be interviewing you will be checking. For instance, the officer may want to see your financials, the documentation that proves that you have the finances to sustain in the US. Well, if you don't have such a document and the officer says, no, we need to see it, well, you're going to get a 221G, all right? And really what that process means is that, hey, look, after you get the 221G slip, you will get a letter from the consulate telling you that, hey, look, this is the exact requirement that you did not fulfill. You have 1 year's time. Within this 1 year's time, you can basically come to the consulate and actually show us this document. Again, I'm kind of saying it in layman sort of a language. Of course, it's a little bit more complex. You have to fill out some forms again. But either way, you have to present yourself at the consulate with those documents, and then you can move further with your process. All right, that's the number 1 reason, guys. Now I'm going to talk to you about reason number 2, and that is immigrant intent. A lot of you guys will be applying to visas like the F1 visa, right? And these sorts of visas are not really immigrant visas. They don't really allow you to move to the US. They allow you to temporarily stay in the US. So whenever you go for an interview for a non-immigrant visa, the officer will automatically assume that, hey, this person is an immigrant. Now it's your job to prove the officer wrong. And of course, you don't want to yell it at him, but of course you want to tell him that, hey, look, these are the strong ties I have in my country. Maybe you have a daughter over here. Maybe you have a business over here. Maybe you have something that cannot be moved to the US, right? And that's what you have to show the officer, that, hey, look, I really have strong ties to this country, so I will be returning. Don't worry, I promise you. Of course, you don't have to be so explicit about it, but yes, that's eventually what it boils down to. Okay, so that's the 214B rejection. You want to avoid that. I've made a separate video on that, guys. You can check this video out, and I'm sure that it will help you if you have received such a slip. Okay, now reason number 3 why you may get your visa interview rejection is lack of financial dependence. What that really means is that and this mostly turns up in an immigrant visa, by the way, but what that really means is that, hey, you may not have the finances to support you when you are actually in the US, given that even if you're granted an immigrant visa, you may essentially turn out to be a burden to the basically to the social security system. The government may have to support you, and you may not even be able to sustain So yeah, that's something that is again very, very important to the government, that hey, you should be able to sustain, you should be able to pay your taxes, and if you're not able to prove that, then you may end up getting this slip. Okay. Reason number 4 that is again very, very common, that turns up in a lot of situations, is fraud and misinterpretation. Now again, this is very, very important, guys. A lot of times when you're filling the forms before the visa interview, you have to fill up long forms, and these are usually the DS forms, DS 160, stuff like this. So when you're filling these forms up, a lot of times people will provide inaccurate information. They will try to hide their blood relatives in the US, that hey, maybe you have a sister in the US already studying over there, already settled down over there. People try to hide this information just because they don't want the consular officer to find out. And guess what? If the consulate officer finds out something like that, you are in trouble. You will get this slip, all right? And this comes under fraud. There's another case. Maybe you're trying to hide your past criminal. Now, this can also happen if you're trying to hide past crimes, maybe some crimes that you have committed. Again, you may know that, these forms, they ask you about this information. And if you're trying to hide it and somehow your consulate officer finds out that, hey, look, this is on this person's record, again, that's under fraud and misinterpretation. This sort of an activity can often lead to a permanent ineligibility to apply to a visa type for the US. In fact, they can even ban you permanently. So I would be really, really careful when doing these sorts of activities. I would say that, I would really advise against it. You are playing with fire, my friend. Okay, so try not to make this mistake as well. And number 5, and that is the final one in this video that I'm gonna be covering, and that is unlawful presence in the United States. This can happen whether, let's say you were on a valid visa type in the US and you extended your stay without really extending your visa. So visa expired, but you were still in the US. Case number 1. Again, there can be a lot of cases, but the most common case is this one. The second case, also a little bit more rare, is that you never really had any approval from the Customs and Immigration Department and you just entered the US illegally, right? And again, both of these are severe issues. They can, the first one can have maybe a 3-year ban. If you stayed under 180 days, you extended your period under 180 days without a visa. If you did that more than 180 days, then it can even be a 10-year ban. So I think these cases are something you should really keep in mind again, all right? So guys, I hope that I presented to you all the most common ways why your visa may get rejected. Now that you know these, now the purpose is not to get or reject, of course. The purpose is that with this information, you are now better suited. You will know that these are the common traps and you will know how to escape them. So hopefully you should not make these mistakes. The second point, 214B rejection, that's a non-immigrant to immigrant thing. That's something that I have already talked about in detail in another video. I believe that's something that is imperative. You should take a look at it. But apart from that, these 5 should get you covered for your visa interview. All the best for your interview process. If you need any help, feel free to get in touch with me and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Subscribe to the channel. Goodbye. Take care.